What she had bought, they laughed. Not a small laugh. They laughed so hard that one of her brothers nearly dropped his coffee. $20? He asked. You spent $20 on that. She simply nodded. Her family knew exactly what she had purchased. A completely overgrown piece of land at the edge of town. The weeds were taller than a person in some places. Thorny vines covered the old fence. There was no working irrigation system, no crops, no equipment, and no visible sign that anyone had used the land in years. To everyone else, it was worthless, but she wasn't looking at what the field was. She was looking at what it could become. And 8 months later, the same people who laughed at her would stand at the edge of that field in complete silence. Because something had happened there that nobody expected. It all started when she lost her job. For months, she had been trying to figure out what to do next. She had very little money, and moving back in with her family wasn't exactly an option. So she began looking for cheap land. One afternoon, she heard about a neglected field that the owner desperately wanted to get rid of. The price? $20. When she arrived, she immediately understood why. The place looked abandoned. Wild plants covered almost every inch of the soil. Broken wooden posts leaned against one another. Parts of the fence had completely disappeared beneath vines. Her first thought was simple. This is going to be a lot of work. But then she noticed something. Beneath the weeds, the soil was dark, rich. And when she dug a little deeper, she found something even more interesting. Earthworms. Lots of them. That told her the soil was alive. She stood there for several minutes, imagining rows of vegetables stretching across the field. Then she made her decision. She bought it. When she told her family, they couldn't understand. Her brother laughed. You don't even know how to run a farm. Another shook his head. You've just wasted your money. Someone even joked that the only thing she would harvest was weeds. She didn't argue. She just smiled and went back to the field. The next morning, she began clearing it. She didn't have a tractor. She didn't have expensive machinery. She had a pair of gloves, a shovel, a borrowed wheelbarrow, and determination. For days, she pulled weeds by hand. Then came the vines. Some were so thick that she had to cut them apart piece by piece. Her hands became covered in scratches. Her back hurt. And more than once, she stood in the middle of the field wondering if her family had been right. But every morning, she returned. Week 1 became week 2. Week 2 became week 4. Slowly, the field began to change. Then she discovered an old irrigation pipe buried beneath the ground. She followed it. It led to a small underground water source that had been forgotten for years. That discovery changed everything. Instead of spending money digging an expensive well, she was able to repair the old system. Water began flowing again, and for the first time, she could see a real farm taking shape. She planted vegetables first. Beans, tomatoes, peppers, leafy greens. She also planted a few fruit trees along the edge of the property. But then came the hardest part, waiting. The first few weeks produced almost nothing. Some plants died. Others were eaten by insects. A storm destroyed several rows. She woke up one morning to discover that much of her work had been damaged overnight. She sat on the ground and stared at the ruined plants. For a moment, she thought about giving up. After all, everyone had already told her she was wasting her time. But instead of quitting, she replanted. And this time, something different happened. The plants grew. Then they grew faster. Within a few months, the field that had once been buried beneath weeds was turning green. Rows of healthy crops stretched across the property. The old fence had been repaired. A small storage shed stood where weeds once grew. and the forgotten irrigation system was working perfectly. But she still hadn't told her family. She wanted them to see it for themselves. 8 months after buying the field, she finally invited them over. Her brothers arrived expecting to see the same ugly piece of land they had laughed about. But when they reached the entrance, they stopped. Nobody said anything. The field was almost unrecognizable. Where there had once been weeds, there were now perfectly organized rows of crops. The vegetables were thriving. Fruit trees were beginning to grow. The irrigation system carried water through the field. And beside the entrance was a small wooden stand where she had started selling fresh produce to people in the community. One of her brothers slowly walked forward. He looked at the crops, then at the repaired fence, then back at her. "Did you do all this?" She smiled. Yes. He didn't laugh this time. He couldn't. The brother who had once told her that she had wasted $20 picked up one of the vegetables and stared at it. Then he asked the question she had been waiting for. "How much are you making from this?" She smiled again, because that was the part nobody knew. The field wasn't just feeding her anymore. It was paying her bills. The $20 purchase had become a small, profitable farm. And the greatest lesson wasn't how much money she made. It was what the field had taught everyone watching. Sometimes people judge your decision by what they can see today. They see weeds. They see failure. They see something nobody wants. But they don't see the work you're willing to put in. They don't see the possibility hiding underneath the surface. And they certainly don't see what 8 months of patience can accomplish. Her family had laughed at a $20 field. 8 months later, they were standing inside a farm that had become the very thing they thought was impossible. And that forgotten piece of land proved something she would never forget. Just because something looks worthless today doesn't mean it has no value. Sometimes it simply needs someone willing to believe in it long enough to bring that value back to life.